For thousands of years, people have turned to one book in particular to find the words for their deepest, most complicated emotions. That book is the Psalms. It's this incredible conversation with God that holds everything from wild, soaring praise to the most bitter anger and doubt. So how can one book contain such extremes? Well, let's dive in and find out.
You know, when most of us think about the Psalms, this is probably what comes to mind. It's that comforting, serene kind of faith. It just wraps you in this feeling that everything is okay, that everything's going to be all right. It's a picture of a world that is safe and orderly and reliable, and it's a huge reason why these poems are so deeply loved.
But then, in that exact same book, you find this. This is the very last line of Psalm 88. It's this raw, completely unfiltered cry of absolute despair. There's no happy ending here, no silver lining. It's just profound pain and a feeling of being totally alone.
So, that lands us squarely at our big question for today. How can a single collection of poetry hold both this perfect serene confidence and this absolutely shattering heartbreak? What are we supposed to make of that incredible, jarring range of human experience?
Well, this paradox has really led to two completely different ways of reading the Psalms. And traditionally, these two approaches have kind of existed in their own separate worlds, leaving most of us with a pretty divided and frankly incomplete picture.
So on one side, you have the devotional approach. It's all about the heart, it's full of passion, but it tends to cherry pick, often skipping right over those difficult or, darker psalms. Then on the other side, you've got the scholarly approach. It's critical, it's analytical, but man, it can feel so disconnected from any kind of real, lived faith. We've basically been left with a choice: all heart and no head, or all head and no heart.
But what if there's a third way? This is where the scholar Walter Brueggemann comes in. He suggests we need what he calls a post-critical interpretation. The idea is to bring the heart and the head back together. It takes all those brilliant formal insights from scholarship and uses them to go deeper into our personal devotional understanding. It gives us a much richer and way more honest picture of what the Psalms are actually doing.
So what does this post-critical approach actually show us? Well, it reveals that the Psalms aren't just some random jumble of poems. No, they actually function as a kind of map, a map for the soul that charts the universal seasons of our emotional and spiritual lives.
And this map, it outlines three huge movements that really we all go through. First, there are the seasons of orientation, right? That's when life feels stable, predictable, blessed. Then come the seasons of disorientation, when our entire world just falls apart. And finally, if we're lucky, we experience seasons of surprising new orientation, when hope and new life break through in totally unexpected ways.
And what's so fascinating here is how this framework connects so deeply to the core stories in both Jewish and Christian faith. Think about it. That move from the stability of orientation into the suffering of disorientation, it perfectly mirrors the crucifixion. And the move from that suffering into a new orientation, filled with hope, well, that directly reflects the resurrection. It's this universal pattern of loss and renewal, woven into the fabric of everything.
Okay, so let's dig into that first season, orientation. This is the no-surprise world. Life makes sense, God feels reliable, and blessings feel like they're just part of the deal. These are the Psalms that give voice to the joy and the delight and the sheer goodness of a world that feels coherent.
The main job of these Psalms is to build what scholars call a sacred canopy. They create this shared sense of certainty, this trust that life has a fundamental goodness we can all rely on. They hammer home this idea that the world is a well-ordered system, and it's all guaranteed by God.
But we have to look at this with a critical eye too, right? These big statements about how orderly the world is, well, they often come from the successful, from the people for whom the system is already working just fine. And this kind of faith can absolutely be used to celebrate and protect an unfair status quo. But, and this is a big but, these very same Psalms can also express this powerful hope for a future where God's perfect order will finally bring justice and fairness for everyone.
Because of course, life often isn't neat and tidy. It can be just savagely painful, chaotic, and full of suffering. And that brings us to the second season on our map, the move into the darkness of disorientation.
Now, our culture often tells us that being negative is a sign of weak faith, but the Psalms teach the exact opposite. To bring our raw pain, our confusion, even our rage directly to God. That's a profound act of trust. It's a bold, courageous faith that insists on looking at the world as it really is and insists that God is right there with us,
even in the darkness. And this bold faith, it actually has a structure. The Psalms of Lament, the language of disorientation, they typically follow a certain pattern. They start with a plea. This is a raw, desperate, no-holds-barred complaint to God about how awful things are. But then, almost miraculously, they so often pivot to praise, a sudden expression of trust and confidence in God.
Okay, but wait a minute. This is one of the most startling, most mysterious moves in the entire Bible. How in the world does someone go from crying out in total anguish one moment to singing God's praises the next? What on earth happens in that space between the plea and the praise?
So what's the answer? Well, the leading theory is something scholars called the salvation oracle. The idea is that in the middle of this raw, emotional prayer, a priest or a prophet would step in and deliver a message from God, a powerful word of assurance, something like, "Fear not." And it's that intervening word of hope from outside the self that changes everything. It's what allows the speaker to move from despair to confidence.
In that moment of hope, that's what leads us to the third and final season on our map, the emergence of a new orientation, where we are just ambushed by grace right when we thought all was lost. Now, this is absolutely crucial to understand. This isn't about just going back to the good old days. You can't unexperience disorientation. No, this is a genuine transformation. It's a totally new gift, a new possibility that is completely unexpected. It's something you could only credit to the surprising, unearned grace of God.
So when all is said and done, why does this ancient map of the soul still matter for us today? What's the big takeaway from looking at the Psalms this way?
It matters because we live in a culture that is deeply, deeply committed to avoiding pain and resisting genuine surprise. We're constantly encouraged to pretend everything is fine, to manage every single aspect of our lives to prevent both loss and any kind of unexpected newness. So, to honestly name our disorientation and to open ourselves up to a new orientation that we can't possibly control, well, that's a deeply countercultural, you could even say subversive act. Ultimately, this whole framework doesn't just explain the Psalms. It gives us an honest language for our own lives. It tells us it's okay to be in a season of stability. It gives us permission to cry out in our seasons of pain. And it reminds us to always keep an eye out for those seasons of surprising grace. It gives us a map for the soul. And the only question left to ask is, where on the map do you find yourself today?